Did you ever try therapy with Kody and Robyn to work things out? Janelle's answer drops like a hammer. No. I don't like them. It's really that simple. There's no hesitation, no sugarcoating. And then she adds something even heavier, all these emotions I'm dealing with. I'm realizing it would be so much easier if I'd just let go. For years, she avoided the pain altogether. She pushed it down, convinced she didn't want to deal with any of it. But now? She's finally facing the big question, what do I need to do to close this chapter for good? And the answer, for her, is clear: she wants every loose end tied up. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's story dives deeper than drama. This is about liberation. Janelle Brown is about to begin a mission to free herself spiritually from Kody Robyn. But here's where the whole situation becomes almost absurd. She wants out of the Apostolic United Brethren. And the only person who can grant that spiritual release is the prophet at the head of the church. Except, that very prophet is locked in a bitter lawsuit with his own ex-spiritual wife. A woman who says she's been begging for her release for decades, all while fighting him for property she claims he took from her. So yes, Janelle is seeking freedom from a man who won't even free his own wife. We're absolutely getting into that. And as she prepares to finally cut these spiritual ties, she's also bracing herself for something else: Kody trying to re-enter her life. Her daughter, Maddie, sees it coming and immediately calls it out. To her, this is just another chaotic Kody-style drop-in. The man has perfected the art of showing up exactly when Janelle gains momentum. He knows how to reel her back in, he's done it for years. Meanwhile, Kody keeps claiming he's done with polygamy. Swears he'd never consider it again. But in this episode? He suddenly decides he needs to apologize to all his wives, to set them free. The irony? They're already free. What he's really doing is damage control, a storyline, a way to protect his ego, and above all, a desperate attempt to hold on to his marriage with Robyn. While all this unfolds, Janelle and her friends are discussing her next step, the spiritual release she's ready for. And this brings up her family's history with polygamy, which people love to twist. See, my mom pulled me out of polygamy because she refused to let her daughter marry into what she believed was a dangerous cult. And then? She married Kody's dad, months before I married Kody himself. It shocked me, sure. It felt weird. But eventually I thought, well, if she's happy, then okay. At least I wasn't completely alone. And this is where Janelle's relatives get so unfairly portrayed. People say they were irrational, dramatic, anti-polygamy extremists. But in reality? They were scared for her. They didn't want her walking into something that had a long, bloody history. They wanted her safe. And honestly, they had every reason to worry. Let me pull back the curtain and give you a quick history lesson so you understand exactly why their fears were valid. Janelle and her first husband, Adam Barber, got together in 1988, a time when the polygamous underground was drowning in violence. The entire region, Utah, Arizona, Idaho, Nevada, saw some of the most disturbing religious shootings and sect-on-sect killings in decades. Just 10 years earlier, in 1978, the leader of the Apostolic United Brethren, Rulon Allred, was assassinated by two women from a rival sect. They were followers of a self-declared prophet named Ervil LeBaron, a man who broke away from his brother's church in Mexico and declared himself God's chosen executioner. He believed certain sins required blood atonement, that even Christ's sacrifice wasn't enough, and therefore he had the right to spill blood in God's name. And he acted on it. This man murdered his own brother, Joel. Another brother died mysteriously in a crash. He ordered the assassination of Rulon Allred. And even after he died in prison, his followers kept going, carrying out his hit list as holy duty. I've spoken personally with his daughters, Anna and Celia LeBaron. They described nights where their father stayed awake writing extremist doctrines, convinced he was guided by God. His young followers treated these writings like scripture. So yes, when Janelle stepped into this world, the community was in the middle of violent faction wars. And the danger peaked around 1988, especially in Texas, when one of LeBaron's groups decided to complete his so-called divine mission. The violence surrounding this movement didn't just stop with one murder spree, it escalated. Ervil LeBaron's followers were determined to finish his unfinished hit list. Anyone who left his sect was considered guilty under his extremist doctrine of blood atonement, meaning their lives were now targets. And on a single afternoon, exactly 4 p.m., coordinated attacks exploded across Texas. In Houston, Martha Chenoweth was shot 3 times. At another Houston location, Dwayne Chenoweth and his little daughter Jenny were murdered, Jenny simply because she was present. Meanwhile in Dallas, Ed Marine was shot at his business and died later that evening. This wasn't random violence. It was organized, ideological, sect-against-sect warfare, one of the most brutal periods in fundamentalist history. So when Janelle's family tried to intervene, they weren't being dramatic. They weren't being close-minded. They were trying to save her from a world drenched in bloodshed. They watched someone they loved stepping toward a cult that had become notorious for violence, corruption, and spiritual manipulation. Their attempts to pull her out weren't judgment, they were survival instincts. The tragedy is that Janelle later viewed these people as irrational, not because they were wrong, but because indoctrination had convinced her their genuine fears were persecution. Think about this, in 1978, the leader of the AUB, Rulon Allred, was assassinated in cold blood. His killers were 2 spiritual wives following orders from Ervil LeBaron, a self-declared prophet who had broken from his brother's sect in Mexico. This man believed he was divinely appointed to eliminate any prophet he considered false. His holy justification? A twisted version of blood atonement, the belief that some sins were so severe that even Christ's sacrifice wasn't enough, giving faithful followers divine permission to kill. And LeBaron didn't stop at preaching, he acted. He murdered his own brother, Joel. Another brother mysteriously died in a car crash no one believed was accidental. He ordered the assassination of Rulon Allred, the killing that shocked the entire fundamentalist world. Though he eventually died in prison, the danger didn't die with him. His violent ideology lived on through notebooks and manifestos he left behind. Years ago, I interviewed his daughters, Anna and Celia LeBaron. They told me chilling stories about their father, how he would stay awake for days writing apocalyptic commandments, and how his younger followers treated those writings as sacred law and continued executing the names on his hit list long after he died. So when Janelle entered the AUB community, she wasn't joining a harmless fringe group. She was stepping directly into the center of a decades-long religious war. The bloodshed reached its most explosive point on June 1, 1988, the day LeBaron loyalists attempted to carry out the rest of his divine mission. For coordinated attacks. Multiple murder scenes. All executed at the exact same moment. This was polygamist fundamentalism at its darkest. And inside the AUB itself, things weren't any better. After Rulon's murder, leadership passed to Owen Allred. Under his rule, disturbing doctrines began to surface, including claims that certain leaders were literal descendants of Jesus Christ. And to preserve the sacred bloodline, some of these men assaulted their own daughters. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. This was sexual violence justified by doctrine. Another leader used so-called medical treatments, colonics, as cover to assault both men and women. These revelations set off a mass wave of people fleeing the church through the late 1980s, 1990s, and even the 2000s. But the violence didn't stop. In the late 1990s, in a Bluffdale, Utah church, a man sitting quietly in a pew was murdered, his throat slit, another blood atonement killing carried out in the same church Janelle attended. Shortly after Janelle joined, a member named Gustavo Palacios was arrested for sexually assaulting his stepdaughters, again justified under this twisted spiritual ideology. His wife, who happens to be Christine Brown's first cousin, was arrested as well for enabling the abuse. And while all this was happening in the shadows, a woman named Virginia Hill filed a massive lawsuit against the AUB, accusing them of embezzling over $1 million from her to buy property the church still holds today. That financial scandal implicated Owen Allred himself. So when you line up all these events, the murders, the corruption, the doctrines, the abuses, Janelle's family looks less irrational and more prophetic. They weren't overreacting. They were reading the writing on the wall. They tried to protect her from one of the most dangerous religious organizations in the country. And here's the heartbreaking psychology behind it all. When adults convert to these insular groups, something profoundly tragic happens. They've already severed ties with their families, burned bridges, sacrificed their identity, and walked away from everything they knew. That loss becomes a cage they feel they can't escape. When someone joins a high-control religious group as an adult, there's a brutal psychological reality. Walking away means admitting you sacrificed your relationships, your stability, and your entire identity for nothing. Most people can't face that. So instead of leaving, they double down. They become more devout than the people born into the faith. And that's exactly what Janelle did. She has admitted she entered the AUB with starry-eyed optimism, convinced it would be this beautiful, spiritual experience. But the moment she stepped in, conflict started. There was tension from day one. There was no exit plan. No fallback. She'd abandoned too much to turn back, so she pushed forward, clinging to the faith even as it hurt her. Now she's seeking what the AUB calls a spiritual release, and understanding why she wants it is crucial. When Janelle married Kody inside the AUB temple, they entered into covenants that bound them not just on earth, but for time and all eternity. In this doctrine, marriages continue after death. Women are taught that even if they separate in life, their only path to the celestial kingdom is to remain celibate and spiritually loyal to the man who abandoned them. So spiritually, Janelle is still tethered to Kody. And that bond has kept her from truly moving forward. She even admitted in a previous clip that if she died and discovered the religion was real, the idea of waking up in heaven still spiritually married to Kody horrified her. "Oh hell," she said. "I'm not having that." And that one fear, is the driving force behind her desire for release. She wants to sever that eternal chain so she can finally be free from him, even in the afterlife. But the contrast between the wives is striking. Where Janelle still says my religion, Mary has walked away completely. She openly questions heaven, questions doctrine, and refuses to ever live polygamy again. Christine also doesn't claim the religion anymore. She's done, she's out, she's not looking back. But Janelle is still spiritually tied in. That language, my religion, tells us how deep the conditioning still runs. And here comes the staggering hypocrisy. The prophet who granted Janelle her spiritual release, Dave Watson, is currently being sued by one of his own plural wives, Cherilyn. She says he stole property she co-owns. She says he abandons her for weeks at a time to be with his favorite wife. She says he contributes nothing financially and that every dollar she made from her natural food store and his business funneled straight into his pocket. Her lawsuit goes even further. She claims she has begged for a spiritual release for years, and he flatly refuses. I've spoken with her daughter, Emily, who described allegations of child abuse and physical violence within Watson's household. He claims he has 8 wives, but that's smoke and mirrors. 3 or 4 have already escaped. 1 remains because he will not release her. She's trapped. And here is the heartbreaking irony. Janelle received her spiritual freedom from a man who is doing to his own wives the exact same things Kody did to her. Financial exploitation. Emotional abandonment. Spiritual captivity. Refusing to let them go. This is the devastating loop these women don't see. The indoctrination is so thick, so tied to their eternal salvation, so wrapped in their belief that they are among the righteousness of the celestial kingdom, that they can't recognize when they've simply traded one cage for another. And that cage plays on every insecurity, your worthiness, your destiny, your eternal family. Giving it up means giving up the promise of godhood. That's not a small psychological hurdle. Janelle is intelligent. She sees the contradictions. She connects the dots. But the programming is deep, so deep that even her path out leads her back through the hands of someone perpetuating the very harm she's trying to escape. Yes, she did get the release. And I truly hope she stays out for good. That she builds a life in North Carolina, that she roots herself in her new world, that she keeps moving forward instead of being drawn back into the gravity of her past. Because the truth is brutal, her family saw this coming decades ago. They tried to rescue her. They knew the danger. But she severed ties with them to remain in the faith. And now, her freedom has come through a man arguably more controlling than Kody ever was. That's the tragedy. Yes, the other wives escaped the theology completely. Mary doesn't engage with the belief system at all. Christine has fully detached and built a new life. But Janelle still identifies with it. She still says, "my religion." Those two words speak volumes. She has taken the first step, and that matters. But spiritual deprogramming is a long road, and she's still somewhere in the middle. And here's where things get even more complicated. While Janelle is celebrating this spiritual release as the end of a chapter, the legal and financial ties remain firmly in place. The property. The money. The deeds. The shared assets. Because if you've watched this family from the beginning, you already know one thing with absolute certainty: Kody Brown does not let go of assets without a fight. Fans keep saying Janelle's move to North Carolina was brilliant, that putting 2,000 miles between herself and Flagstaff creates a buffer. And they're right. But what worries me is what she left behind. The disaster that is the Coyote Pass property remains unresolved. Kody's name is still on multiple deeds with hers. The land bought using plural family money, much of which came from Janelle. And that's where the real trap still lies. Janelle poured her own income, even her retirement savings, into Coyote Pass, and yet that land still sits untouched, collecting dust, stacking property taxes, and chaining her to Kody in the most inconvenient way possible. A spiritual release might free her soul, but it doesn't free her paperwork. The AUB can say she's spiritually unbound all day long, but the county recorder says otherwise. On paper, through 6 figures worth of real estate, she and Kody remain deeply, legally attached. And that's exactly why Kody's sudden wave of apologies raises red flags. He's not releasing anyone. He's releasing himself from accountability, while making sure the financial control stays firmly in his hands. We've watched him run this playbook with Mary for a decade. Keep her just close enough so she doesn't take legal action. Keep her just distant enough so he doesn't actually have to treat her like a wife. Janelle is smarter and stronger than that, but trauma bonding mixed with financial entanglement can cloud even the clearest mind. Fans in my comments have been connecting dots and offering theories about what's coming next. Some believe Kody will suddenly take an interest in the North Carolina real estate market, because let's be honest, he has a sixth sense for sniffing out assets. Others think he'll start love-bombing Janelle the moment she tries to sell her portion of Coyote Pass. And honestly, neither scenario is far-fetched. We've seen his patterns. He manipulates proximity. He manipulates distance. He knows exactly when to show up and when to disappear. Remember how he'd conveniently knock on Christine's door right after she started pulling away? Or how he'd magically make time for family gatherings whenever the cameras were rolling? Kody Brown has impeccable timing, because he's always watching for the moment someone becomes vulnerable. Meanwhile, the AUB, the institution granting these spiritual releases, is collapsing from the inside. And that puts Janelle's timing in a strange place, brilliant on one hand, risky on the other. Prophet Dave Watson isn't fighting just one lawsuit. Rumors say more wives are preparing to come forward. The financial foundation is cracking. Young people are leaving fast, faster than they did during the exodus of the 80s and 90s when Janelle first joined. A church that once claimed thousands can now barely fill its pews. So Janelle's spiritual release is coming from a system losing the very power it uses to control women. And former members are watching closely. On XAUB forums, people say Janelle is becoming their litmus test, proof that escape is possible. For some, she's hope. But they're also terrified for her. They know how these men retaliate when their public image takes a hit. They've seen what happens when patriarchs feel humiliated. And Kody's ego has been shredded on national television. Narcissists don't just let their supply walk away.